All right, Mark here. Just taking a little break. Been researching, studying. I'm exhausted, folks. But man. All right, so real quick, not going to take too long in this video, but again, if you watch the last several videos I put up, I'm discussing a lot of quantum physics, right? I'm doing a lot of research on the wave function and the thought 19, I believe 1927 or 1925 thought experiment, double split experiment, which is a thought experiment. And I want to just say real quick, just get this in there. Observation and interference patterns, right? If you've studied any of Schrodinger's equation, you're going to come across this observation and interference pattern. And really quick, observation is a state of consciousness. That's what observation is. Your consciousness, your awareness, right? And interference pattern is when energy is not being watched, right? It behaves as a wave, and there's an interference pattern. Now, if this is a thought experiment, that means this has to do with psychology. Understand? You understand? This is psychology at its finest. This is psychology at its basic, most purest form, right? You gotta kind of unlearn what you've learned about psychology if you know anything about psychology, and kind of open up your mind to this right here. When they talk about when they being the Bohrs, the Neil Bohrs, the Thomas Young, the Einsteins, and Schrodinger's, etc. When they talk about the pattern interference, this is what I interpret it as based off my research. I think, right, again, this is highly philosophical, and it's just me extrapolating, meaning my estimation based off my research. When they say wave patterns, that energy behaves as interference patterns. And interference patterns is where waves interfere with each other, right? The waves that are created from the double split experience, right? This is based off their research. The waves interfere with each other. So there's a pattern interference. What I think that means in terms of your thought and your psychology and how we function, how we are, right? Because this is, when you study this stuff, this is all teaching us how we are to operate, how we operate. This is what I believe based off my research. So the interference pattern that they found, that waves interfere with each other, right, is, how does that look in a practical sense, right, in an applicable sense for your in a psychological sense? Let me give you a prime example. You wake up one morning and you say to yourself, you know what, I want to start a business. The minute you say that, I want you to listen to that voice in your head that interferes with that thought, interference pattern. You see, this is what I believe. This is what I found in psychology, right? You have a thought, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. Take 2 seconds and listen to that voice in your head, interference pattern, right? There's going to be a voice that, and it's not going to be a direct voice like an audible voice, but it's going to be concerns like, okay, I want to start a business. Then you might have a thought like, well, man, I can't start no business. It's, I don't have the money. I don't have the right team, the right people, the right resources. All these I don't haves voices are going to pop up in your head. I believe this is the interference pattern. What they were teaching us with science was called the interference pattern. Because remember, it's all the underlying lesson. What underlies all of this is thoughts, how we interact, how our psychology works. This is in my interpretation of physics. I've been studying for several months now. Again, I'm no authority, but based off how I'm interpreting it, it's how our psychology is supposed to work. The correct operations of our psychology in relation to the universe, right? Because the universe works with your psychology. You are a co-creator with the universe. And if you're aligned with the universe, this will make sense to you. If you're not and you're out of sync, this is all woo-woo stuff and blah, 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 right? But if you are aligned, this makes sense. So the interference pattern I found to apply, what is the interference pattern in terms of us as human beings? The interference pattern, because our thoughts are waves, right? Our thoughts are waves that exist in four different states: beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Right? These are 4 states that we fluctuate in, and these are brain waves. You can go to a doctor and actually get what's called an EEG, electroencephalograph, right? You have EKG, that's for the heart, and then you have the EEG, which is for the brain waves. So when these scientists found out that waves have an interference pattern, they interfere with each other. How do I take that and apply to me personally? Is I say, okay, when I have a thought to do something, immediately there's going to be another thought that's going. And here's the interesting thing: these wave interference patterns that they found, they actually cancel each other out. This is what these wave patterns do. They cancel each other out or they reinforce each other. Again, you wake up one day, you say, you know what, I'm going to start this new diet, right? New Year's resolution, right? We all know this New Year's, we're going to lose 30, 40 pounds. And you're excited. You have the pizzazz, you have the get up and go, the gumption, the moxie to go. You have that moxie, right? And interference patterns, right? As you go, a week go by and you don't lose any weight. Let's say you don't lose any weight after 1 week, right? Because realistically, you probably won't, right? The interference pattern, right? The other thoughts come up now. The other waves are going to come up and interfere with the wave that you collapsed, right? I'll explain what that means. You collapsed it into, okay, I'm going to lose weight. And now other waves, which are other thoughts, are going to come up and cancel those thoughts out. And the year goes by and you don't lose any weight. Interference pattern. Again, you want to start a business, challenges come up. Those challenges trigger those other waves to interfere with your first wave of, I'm going to, start this business. And all of a sudden your business is not started, canceled out, right? Negative reinforcement, right? Yeah, negative reinforcement by other waves, your other interference, interference patterns, right? This is what I believe they found, right? They found the scientific evidence for why we always have that negative thought, right? Everything you say you're going to do positive. Anytime someone sets a goal, there's always the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Whatever that goal is, the opposite end of that spectrum is its cancellation or its nullification, right? I'm going to do this. You're not going to do that, right? That thought, right, comes up to let you know you're not going to do it. It's in all of us. It's inherent in all of our makeup. And this is what I believe they were trying to show us with interference patterns in terms of the double slit experiment. Now, the second part of that experiment was observation, right? Where they realized that based on observation, the way the energy behaved, light behaved as a wave, which is what we just discussed a second ago, or it behaves as a particle. And when it behaves as a particle, it's when it's being observed. When it's being observed, there's something called a collapsing of the function, of the wave function. Collapsing is just another way of saying all other probabilities or all the possibilities vanish, and you arrive at one state instead of all probabilities. You have arrived at one state. I don't want to. That's another conversation, and I can really elucidate on that. But I want to kind of focus on the observation aspect because this part is really interesting. I like it. The observation, when it says the observation, collapses the wave function. Your observation is your consciousness, right? And when you increase, if there's an increase in consciousness, there's a decrease in pattern interference, in the interference pattern. This is conclusive evidence based off the experiment. They found when the observation increased, the interference pattern decreased. I'll say that one more time. Increase of observation led to a decrease in pattern interference or in the interference pattern. Right? And what that means now, again, how can we apply that? What does that mean in your life psychologically? The greater your focus is on losing the weight, the greater your concentration is on losing the weight. This is observation, right? Observation means I'm using these other terms synonymously, right? It's synonymously, right? So concentration, greater concentration, a decrease in interference patterns. And I just told you what interference patterns are, right? Greater concentration, greater observation, increased consciousness, increased awareness, decreased interference patterns. So that means when you say, I'm going to lose this 30, 40 pounds, The more you're focused on that, the greater you're conscious of that, the greater your awareness of that, the lesser interference patterns you're going to have. What that means is when those other voices pop up that say, no, you can't lose this weight. Look at this piece of cake. Who are you kidding? You're a fat slob. You've always been a fat slob. You're going to stay a fat slob. When you look in the mirror, you start hearing that voice that lies to you, right? The volume of that will be reduced dependent on the increase of your focus, the increase of your the intensity of your observation, the intensity of your concentration, the intensity of your consciousness. The more conscious you are and aware of your goal, whatever it may be, lose weight, start the business, go back to school, the greater your concentration is, the lesser the interference patterns will be. Interference patterns can come in various shapes and forms. Again, it don't have to be inherent. It could be external. An interference pattern could be, I'm going to start a business. Your wife says, well, you always talking about starting businesses and you never get anything done. You're always taking money and investing and failing. Interference pattern, right? You know what? I'm going to go back to school. A friend, oh, you're too old, man. What you going back to school for? Dude, you missed that boat. You know, the window has closed. You should have did that when you was, younger or whatever. Interference pattern. It doesn't have to be an inherent interference pattern. It could be external. It could be inherent. Interference pattern comes in various shapes or forms, but this is how it looks in the real world. Because remember, the quantum state is only a miniature, a minuscule, an infinitesimal existence of what we are. I'm going to keep it right there. So I was going to keep it short. So I'm not going to go through, I can stay here all night with you, but I'm going to end it now because I got to get back to my research. But I hope you get the takeaway. The greater your observation, the less the lesser interference patterns you'll have. And let me just translate it in very contemporary terms. The more focused you are, the less bullshit you'll let distract you. The more focused you are, the less distractions you're going to have. That's just in lay terms. The more concentrated, the more focused, the more observed you are on your goals or whatever it is you want to do, the less distractions is going to get you. That's observation interference pattern in lay terms. All right, peace out. If you like this video, you know what to do. Share it, leave a comment, subscribe, whatever. Peace.